Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I hope you're all well. A lot of prayers for all of you for your well-being. In the last class, we had studied Ayat 6 and 7 from Surah Al Qaria, and we had done a little bit of discussion on the word mawazin as to the understanding of the scholars, what they have understood it to mean, the scales or the balance which will be which Allah will establish on the day of judgment. So today inshallah we'll do a brief recap of ayat 6 and 7 and then continue till the end of the surah. First I will recite the remaining portion of the surah with the translation, and then we will discuss it inshallah ta'ala. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا ورزقا طيبا. O Allah, indeed I ask you for beneficial knowledge and acceptable deeds and pure and acceptable provision. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinabah. O Allah, show us the truth as the truth and give us the ability to follow it, and show us the falsehood as falsehood and give us the ability to avoid it. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فأما من ثقلت موازينه. And then he whose weight is heavy in the balance, فهو في عيشة راضية, shall find himself in a happy state of life. وأما من خفت موازينه. Whereas he whose weight is light in the balance, فأمه هاوية, shall be engulfed by an abyss. وما أدراك ما هي. And what could make thee conceive what that will be? Narun hamia, a fire hotly burning. So as we had discussed in the last class, that the word mawazin, which means balance or scales of balance, has been interpreted by the scholars in two ways. Imam Razi writes that there are two sayings about mawazin. This is the plural of mawzun. This is the first opinion, and this refers to an act which holds some weight or importance in the sight of Allah. It could be any action, it could be a very small action, but it has some weight or some importance or some value in the sight of Allah. So the word mawzun refers to the action. Number two, this is the plural of mizan, which means scales. The scales which are used to measure. We notice that there are various other opinions concerning the interpretation of mawazin. According to one opinion, our book of deeds, our namai amal, the book of deeds, the book of actions, will be weighed, which means that all the actions or whatever we have done throughout our lives, we have the faith that it is all being recorded. Allah has a record of all our deeds, and that book of deeds will be presented to us, and that book of deeds will be weighed. Another opinion suggests that since the acts are abstract, they will be given a physical form and then weighed. According to one more opinion, only the pure good deeds will have weight. So the good deeds themselves are the mawazin. The purpose of mentioning, like I said, the weighing of the deeds on the day of judgment is to reassure that Allah will judge with absolute justice. Nothing will be left out. Every little action of ours will be taken into consideration and weighed, and we will be recompensed. We will be given the appropriate reward or punishment. And this example of weighing is relatable for us, especially, like I said, for the primitive Arabs. because in those days it was inconceivable for them to imagine how abstract things could be measured. I mean, in this day and age, we can measure temperature, we can measure, invisible things as well. But for the Arab, for the primitive Arab of those days, it was very hard to imagine. I mean, for us, I mean, we have the concept of video recordings, audio recordings as well. But for the Arab, the primitive Arab of those days, there was no such technology. So to reassure the Arab and to reassure humanity that none of your actions, whether hidden or apparent, will be unnoticed. They will all be taken into consideration, and every action will be weighed, and we will be recompensed accordingly. In reality, how this judgment will actually take place, like I said, is not knowable. But we must have full faith that there will be absolute justice that day. Generally, it's a popular notion amongst people about the Day of Judgment that there will be two scales, one of which will weigh the good deeds and the other will weigh the bad deeds. But as I mentioned earlier, according to some scholars, there will be only one scale, and only the pure good deeds which meet Allah's standard will have any weight. Allama Jafar Subhani writes in his tafsir, the known balance which we use to measure things have two scales, but the balance on the Day of Judgment will have only one scale, and there will not be two scales, one measuring good deeds and the other measuring bad deeds. In fact, what will be weighed in the scale will only be the good deeds. The bad deeds will have absolutely no weight in the scale. Now let's look at a few ayat from the Quran which mention wazni amal, the weight of deeds. Surah Araf, ayat number 8 and 9. وَالْوَزْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقِّ فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And true will be the weighing on that day, and those whose weight is heavy in the balance, it is they who shall attain to a happy state. وَمَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ بِمَا كَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يَظْلِمُونَ. Whereas those whose weight is light in the balance, it is they who will have squandered their own selves by their willful rejection of our messages. Similarly, in Surah Mu'minun, ayat number 102 and 103, فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And they whose weight is heavy in the balance, it is they who will have attained to a happy state. وَمَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ فِي جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدُونَ. Whereas they whose weight is light in the balance, it is they who will have squandered their own selves to abide in hell. So the person will have a certain weight of good deeds. The person having a certain weight of good deeds, such an individual will have a life fulfilling all his desires. So there is a certain standard that that person will have to meet according to all the abilities, according to all the resources that Allah has provided him with. If he is able to show up with that standard or that requirement of good deeds which Allah has expected from us, those pure good deeds with good intentions, then that person will be rewarded with Jannat. Imam Razi writes that scholars of tafsir have understood the word Radiya to mean such a life wherein the individual will be extremely happy, he will be ecstatic, he will be full of joy, he will have a life of his own, like a life which is fulfilling all his desires, like I said. That is to say that the perfect life that any person desires, you see, is not attainable in this life, because the worldly life here, we notice, is based on non-perfection. And it is impossible to attain that perfect life because the forces of evil are very much there. So such a perfect ideal life which is free of fear and grief, fulfilling all a person could desire, is only attainable in the hereafter. So to summarize Surah Al Qaria, number one, it is an alarming reminder of the certainty of the day of judgment. In very brief words, Allah Ta'ala has reminded us in a very profound manner that that we will all be accountable for all our deeds. So it is an extremely important reminder. And it is something that we must remember. We must try and make this a part of our daily thought process, of our conscious thinking, on our day-to-day dealings with people. That it becomes like second thought, that it comes to us almost as if that thought is always there, that I am accountable, that I will be accountable, that I will be accountable. And human beings, we are being told, will be utterly helpless like scattered moths. Our freedom will be gone that day. The only way to attain salvation on that day is to have enough of those actions which will have weight in Allah's scale of judgment. So all those good deeds mentioned in the Quran, the A'mal Salihah, the good deeds, they will have weight in the scales if they have been done purely for Allah's sake and not for any other reason. So we must remember this, that to have actions which will have weight on the day of judgment, they must be pure. They must be done solely for the sake of Allah, having full faith in Allah and the day of recompense, and not for any other reason. So, checking one's intentions whilst performing any good deed is absolutely essential. So, the key takeaways, I believe, from this surah, number one is that like I said, it's a profound reminder of the day of judgment. So, one must always remember that we will be answerable for this worldly life. Day to day, we must remember this. We must make this a part of our thought process, like I said, that I will be answerable to Allah. I will be answerable to Allah for everything, for all that I'm doing, for all the resources that I've been blessed with, what I have done with them. And to be able to attain salvation, to be able to gain entry into Jannat, to attain that perfect life, I must have enough of those pure good deeds which will have wazan, which will have weight on the day of judgment in the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah ta'ala give us the ability to remember this and the ability to achieve those deeds, those pure good deeds which meet His standard. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.